there's so much that we are praying for right now in terms of healing. That we felt like we couldn't just go back to the same healing songs that we've been singing all along, because this is a very different time. So we are going to introduce you to a new and beautiful healing prayer. The words are actually here in your Machzor on page 73. It's the top one, Heal Us Now. Actually, it's the whole page. Page 73. So please follow along. Hold the names of those that you are praying for in your heart. If you'd like to say them aloud, actually, there's power in that. So you can take a moment to do that. Those of you at home, I invite you to do the same. And then we'll lead you in this healing song.
there's something quite incredible about being out here. Those of us who are outside of our sanctuary, and even those who are watching from home, as I've been sitting and watching the light change, seeing the light against our beautiful sanctuary, being out in nature and feeling God's presence, having that sense not of being enclosed, but being wide open. We speak during these Yomim Noraim, these days of awe, we speak of Avinu Malkeinu, we speak of our Father, our King. We speak of the grandeur of God's presence that we can really feel in this incredible moment. There are so many ways of thinking about God. Some very ancient ways that we use our Father, a King. Some other more modern ways might be more connected to nature, more connected to, as we've been talking about, our very breath of life. However we envision God, however we open ourselves up to the divine presence, allow holiness to be present in our lives, we invite that moment as we come to Avinu Malkeinu. We begin on page 75. O God, 100 generations have stood before the ark, and they lifted up their voices like flame on the altar. They put their trust in kindness and justice. They gave their strength to make the promise real. Avinu Malkeinu, we haven't forgotten. Avinu Malkeinu, bring us back to you. Page 77, we rise. Together. Avinu Malkeinu Shema Kolenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Almighty and merciful, hear our voice. Avinu Malkeinu Chatanu Lefanecha. Avinu Malkeinu, we have strayed and sinned before you. Avinu Malkeinu Chamol Aleinu Ve'al Oladenu V'Tapenu. Avinu Malkeinu, have compassion on us and our families. Avinu Malkeinu, Kaleh Dever V'Cheret V'Ra'av Ve'Aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, halt the onslaught of sickness, violence, and hunger. Avinu Malkeinu, Kaleh Gold Star Mastin Ve'Aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, halt the reign of those who cause pain and terror. Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu B'Sefer Chaim Tovim. Avinu Malkeinu, enter our names in the book of lives well lived. Avinu Malkeinu, Kadesh Aleinu Shana Tovah. Avinu Malkeinu, renew for us a year of goodness. Avinu Malkeinu, Aleinu V'Aleinu, Ki Ein Lanu Ma'asim, Aseh Imanu Tzedakah V'Chesed V'Hoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, Almighty and merciful, answer us with grace where our deeds are wanting. Save us through acts of justice and love.
Avinu
have noticed what might seem like an incongruous fact about me. I'm a tall guy, but I drive a small sports car. It's a little hard to miss. Seeing me fold compactly into my tiny blue Mazda Miata convertible seems to amuse people for some reason. Reminds me of my even smaller red Triumph Spitfire that I had when I was in college. Now, it's true. Some people tend to make assumptions about middle-aged men driving around in a two-person convertible. I don't actually know what those assumptions are, but I can imagine. In fact, I recall many years ago, I was dreaming out loud about one day buying such a vehicle. A friend of mine wisely informing me that it would be absolutely inappropriate for a rabbi to own one. Can you imagine what people would say? She warned me. Well, the truth is, I stopped trying to imagine. I've noticed, though, one thing. People tend to act as if I'm speeding in that car, no matter how slowly I drive. I've had pedestrians admonish me. Police officers give me the stink eye, despite my actual speed. We all make assumptions about others, don't we? The other day I had an interesting experience in my little car. As I was driving well below the speed limit through some rather winding roads, I noticed a large black SUV riding my tail. You really pay attention to the difference in size and weight when you're in a small car with the top down on a warm summer evening, and I felt fairly menaced. Even polite Portland has been known to have road rage. Then, I started feeling defiant. Clearly, the driver behind me wanted me to speed up and was annoyed that my little sports car, which after all should be racing along, was blocking their progress. So, as is my nature, I decided to show my independence and my defiance by slowing down even more. That'll show them. But it turned out I couldn't shake my pursuer. No matter how many turns that big SUV was right behind me, headlights glaring at me to speed up, I started getting a little nervous. What kind of danger was I putting myself into? You know, the kinds of people who drive those things. Who knows what lengths they would go to if they found me really annoying? My opponent followed me every step of the way, even to my final destination. My heart was pumping when I arrived and pulled over. The truck had parked right behind me. The door was opening. A final confrontation was looming. Out stepped a dear friend who was going to the same party I was. She laughed when she saw me. She said, "Rabbi, here's a sermon for you." I was so angry about how slow you were going until I saw that it was you. Then my anger dissipated. "See," she said, "love conquers all." Now, I'm grateful that it was my friend who jumped out of the car instead of some violence-prone rowdy dude with attitude and a baseball bat. But I actually took away a different lesson from that encounter than she did. Why, I wondered, did we both make assumptions about the other, based on little more than the cars we were driving? Why was our instinct to be so ungenerous? Why didn't we start by being kind? Much has been made about the anxiety, sadness, indeed the desperation which has infected all of our souls over the course of this pandemic. Extremes of emotion engulf us as we vacillate through isolation and integration. It was not long ago that many of us were experiencing elation at the prospect of returning to normal, only to feel a renewed despondency as the Delta variant has brought us back to some of the worst numbers of this entire pandemic, and a return to familiar and unmissed restrictions. Our mood has darkened as we hear daily reports of overwhelmed hospital emergency rooms, ICUs. Our sense of being in control has been shattered by reports of breakthrough infections, even in our own temple community. And what I hear the most from congregants when reflecting on their emotional state is surprise at their own anger. Some of the most compassionate people I know, advocates for social justice, the needs of others very much unlike themselves, go out of their way to report to me a sense of shame at how angry they are at the unvaccinated. They tell me their secret satisfaction at learning that some well-known vaccination denier has come down with COVID. I hear expressions of shame and surprise. But what I don't hear is remorse. Justification in their righteous anger overwhelms their more generous nature. I understand. We're all living with road rage these days. But what if? What if we could step out of our cars for a moment? What if we tried to see each other as real and complex and vulnerable? What if we could get back to kindness? The biblical word for kindness is chesed. The rabbis use the term gemilut chasadim to denote acts of loving kindness. The Talmud notes that the Torah begins and ends with gemilut chasadim, with acts of kindness from God to human beings. Rabbi Simlai points out that in Genesis, God's first action after the creation of human beings is to dress them, to clothe the naked. Rabbi goes on to point out that God's last action in the Torah is to bury Moses, to honor the dead. Birth to death, these actions provide a range. The Torah exists in this reading to remind us to act with kindness, with compassion, with generosity towards the needs of others, whether we think they deserve it or not. Human beings often make choices which disappoint God, and yet God responds with kindness. How hard it can be to remember this in our age of polarization. Political commentators, sociologists point out that in our tribalism, the failure of the other is actually more important than our own success. We care more that an enemy loses than that we win. But this is the very opposite of chesed. Kindness, compassion, generosity holds us to help one another, to care about one another, no matter how different, no matter how much we disagree with their choices. Chesed is God's response to the needs of human beings. It is God's light, even in troubled times. It is within our power to choose to act, to choose to respond with that same kindness that God shows to us. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel writes, "We live by the conviction that acts of goodness reflect the hidden light of God's holiness. God's light is above our minds, but it is not above our will. It is within our power to mirror God's unending love in deeds of kindness, like brooks that hold the sky." I love Heschel's image there. Like brooks that hold the sky. Our acts of loving kindness are tiny streams rippling through the forest, individually seemingly meaningless. But they reflect the sky's worth of God's loving kindness. Truly, we hold the sky. We tend to think that when our anger is justified, we have no need to be kind, no need to be generous. We note with surprise our own response, but we never think to change it. And yet our anger, our quiet rage of the responsible, as Paul Krugman put it, does not make things better. In the end, it doesn't even make us feel better. We're not wrong, but we're also not kind. We find ourselves seething in our own anger, seeking out others who agree with our indignation and who reinforce our rage, but we cannot find our way out of our own pit. And, not insignificantly, our anger and our righteousness does not motivate others to change. Just as it did when I saw what I perceived to be an angry driver behind me, I just slowed down. I doubled down on the obnoxious behavior that caused the conflict in the first place. And I just felt like I was right. But we can choose to be different. We can choose to act differently. We can choose to reflect God's chesed like brooks that hold the sky. On Yom Kippur, we read in the Torah these well-known words from the book of Deuteronomy. "This day I call heaven and earth to witness regarding you. Life and death I have set before you, blessings and curse. Choose life, so that you and your children may live." It's fair to ask when we hear those words the same question that's been asked through the generations. Well, of course, choose life. Who would choose death? But the point is not the choice. The point is the choosing. The ability to choose remains in our hands. It is not predetermined. How we decide to live determines the kind of life that we will live. Do we live in anger? Do we live in selfishness? Do we live in righteous indignation? Or do we choose to live with kindness, with generosity, with compassion? We can choose not just to believe that we are kind, we can actually be kind. Even when we think we're right, even when we think we're justified, can we have the courage not to be surprised at our responses, but to choose to change our responses, to be more aligned with our vision of ourselves? Can we be more kind? We begin this new year, 5782, engulfed in the unpredictable pandemic and the predictable crisis of our own emotional response. We've been dragged down by our justifiable anger. But Rosh Hashanah offers us the opportunity to lift ourselves up, to act as God does, beginning and ending with kindness. The Torah is filled with acts of betrayal and the disappointing behavior of human beings towards God, and yet the Torah ends as it begins with God's act of gemilut chasadim, loving kindness towards even the undeserving. This is our choice. We can choose life. We can choose to act as God does. We can choose to step out of our cars and reflect God's kindness as the brook reflects the sky. May our hearts be open and our actions compassionate. May we move towards generosity. May we, in this new year of 5782, choose kindness. Amen.
We turn back on our prayer books to page 83. Our calling is to praise the living source. Our duty is to make known the greatness of the one Creator, who trusts us to be guardians of the earth and messengers of Torah, who gives us a destiny shared with all human beings, and who binds our lives to theirs. And so we bend, bow, and give thanks before the Blessed One, whose realm is unfathomable, whose sovereignty over all makes life holy and precious. Please rise. Please be seated. Page 89. Our thoughts turn to loved ones whom death has recently taken from us in recent days, and those who died in this season and years past. Our hearts open as well to the wider circles of loss in our community, and wherever grief touches the human family, we say, Zichronam Livracha, may their memories be for a blessing in this new year and always. You're thinking of someone, especially at these moments of joy, even, of holidays, those that we wish were still sitting next to us, those who still live in our hearts every day. If you want to share their name out loud, please do so now. If you want to hold them in your hearts, you're always welcome. We honor their memories. We rise for Kaddish Tom, page 90. Yitgadol, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah, Be'alma, Divrach, Virte, V'anlich, Malchute, V'chayachon, V'yomachon, V'chaye Dechol Beit Yisrael, V'agalah, V'zman Kari, V'imru, Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah, Mivarach, Le'alam, Ulamei Almaya, Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yipa'ar, V'yitraman, V'yitnaseh, V'yithadar, V'yithaleh, V'yithalal, Shemei L'Kudusha, B'richu. Le'ela, Mikol Birchata, V'shirata, Tushbechata, V'nechemata, Da'amiram, V'alma, V'imru, Amen. Yehi Shlava Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chaim Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru, Amen. Oseh Shalom B'Rama, Huya Aseh Shalom, Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel, V'imru, Amen. May all of their memories be for a blessing, and we say, Amen. Please be seated. It's an honor to invite to the Bima Tony Erdis, live and in person, the president of our synagogue, to share some words with us.
Shana Tovah. So wonderful to see all of you. I probably recognize more of you than you think. My name is Tony Hurdes, and I have the honor to be your president of the board of trustees of Congregation Beth Israel. I'm also famous in my own way. I'm the only president in the history of this great synagogue that was never allowed to speak to you, to the congregants, from inside Bima, from inside the building. So if you have that by jeopardy now, you know it. This is the second Rosh Hashanah we are celebrating under a cloud of COVID challenges. We're entering the high holidays fatigued and uncertain again. However, on the bright side, we are thankful to our temple leadership working tirelessly for us, our relentless and inspirational clergy led by Rabbi Michael Kahana, our hardworking staff led by our second-to-none executive director Josh Kaczynski, our dedicated and collaborative board of trustees, of which I have the honor to be the president. Thank you. COVID. We've all been affected in our own way by COVID. Last year, when we met for Rosh Hashanah on Zoom, it seemed natural to say that much of what we experienced together and learned together has actually strengthened our Jewish future and our community. That adversity challenged us, we raised to the occasion, and accelerated the innovation. However, we recognized at the time that adversity will pass at some point, hopefully soon. How can we still stay motivated to continue to grow together, to innovate together, to become better together? Today, the same questions are as significant as they were last year. But we have an opportunity. Our high holidays offer this ideal opportunity for introspection and reflection. So I ask these questions and more. And I'm sure you each have your own answers. How can we go beyond being our life's administrators? And how do we become our life's leaders towards something more meaningful and long-lasting? How do we eventually go beyond the mask, beyond the vaccine? How do we go beyond the social distancing? How do we get more inspired, kinder, and perhaps more understanding? You have your own answers. I struggle to come up with my own. In the interest of time,
I would say that my answer to these questions and my complete remarks will be emailed to you after the service or tomorrow. But please look for the email. I think you'll like also a link to a TED Talk that's pertinent to the topic. A letter of somebody that I admire in Israel, that we met when we visited Israel. And just be on the look, just take a look and try to answer the questions for yourself. Those are my own answers. Meanwhile, back to the administrative part. Please check our CBI website for all the high holidays information and schedule of events. Please donate to the Robert Peltz Memorial High Holiday Fund, Food Fund by calling our office or using the link on the website. As we enter a new and more hopeful year, I would like to wish you and your entire family happiness, prosperity, and good health, less hardship, and more joy. Shana Tovah, Umetuka.
We're going to ask you to stay up here and help light the candles. So, we usually light candles at the beginning, but we thought it would be lovely since Tony was already up here to just stay here and light candles, which will lead many of us, I know, probably including you, to go to dinner after services. So we are on page 11. Those of you at home, pull out your candles.
Thank you very much. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher shanu v'mitzvotav v'tzivanu v'hadlit ner shel yom tov. Source of blessing, eternal our God, you fill the universe with majestic light, teaching us holiness through sacred obligations, giving us the mitzvah of bringing light on this festival.
Amen. Let's sing together.
Thank you, Tony. We're going to conclude our service as we turn to page 94. And we will invite you to sing with us Adon Olam. Let's all stand, please. Isn't it wonderful to see our professional choir? You guys look fabulous. And Michael Bard's not hiding away in the organ, but right where it's from. Thank you so much.
And Amelia Lucas on flute. Thank you. All of our wonderful musicians.
And to Kol Echad, our Temple's volunteer choir, so beautiful as you bring your music to both of our characters and to each of you. Tomorrow morning, services will be again out here at 10 o'clock. Those of you who are at home, you're welcome to join us as well. The service will also be streamed. Our family service at 1 o'clock, also here. Maybe a little bit warmer, so we'll have more tents. It'll be good. But we will have wonderful times to be able to be together throughout this Rosh Hashanah. Tashlich, those of you who've signed up to join us for Tashlich around town, we'll look forward to seeing you at those locations as well. Page 99. יהי רצון מלפניך אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו שתחדש עלינו שנה טובה ומתוקה. Our God and God of our ancestors, eternal God of all generations, may your presence in our lives this new year renew our spirits and renew our strength. May it be a good year. May it be a sweet year. Shana Tovah.
Thanks for listening with me, Lashana Tova. Happy New Year. And if you want to watch the video, it's on Beth Israel, BethIsrael-PDX.org.